Have you ever felt like you're drifting through life, untethered, as if no matter how much you try to hold on to something, anything, it slips through your fingers like water? There are moments when the world feels like a vast, open sea. The horizon stretches endlessly but offers no clues. You look ahead and all you see is mist. There is no shore in sight, no lighthouse, no sound, only the quiet, persistent ache of not knowing where to go. It's in these moments of stillness, of deep internal pause, that the soul begins to whisper. But at first all you feel is the weight of uncertainty. This isn't the kind of uncertainty that comes from trivial decisions or temporary confusion. No, this is deeper. It's the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that makes you question your very existence. Who am I when the roles I've played begin to fade? Who am I when no one is watching? What remains when the applause stops, when the children grow up, when the career loses its meaning, and when the nights feel longer than the days? Many people spend decades building a life that looks complete from the outside. A structured house, predictable routines, familiar faces. But one day, often without warning, the structure begins to tremble. Not always from an external tragedy. Sometimes it's subtler. A growing restlessness, a silence that feels too loud, a question that won't go away. And suddenly what once brought comfort now feels like a cage. This is the sea of inner uncertainty, a place where you begin to sense that your outer life no longer mirrors your inner truth, where the map you followed so diligently no longer matches the terrain you're walking, where the beliefs you inherited begin to crack. And in the depth of this unknowing, fear creeps in, not of the dark, but of the void, of nothingness, of the possibility that you've missed something essential, something deeply real. You try to navigate it using the tools you've always used, logic, habit, the advice of others, but none of it fits. It's like trying to use a compass that no longer points north. And that's because this journey requires something different. It demands surrender, not in weakness, but in sacred trust. A trust that there is something inside of you, older than memory, wiser than thought, that knows the way. Carl Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." This awakening is not glamorous. It often begins in the quiet devastation of realizing that the life you built was not the life your soul longed for, that the masks you've worn have become too heavy, that the persona, the face you've shown the world, is just a fragment of who you really are. The sea of inner uncertainty is not a mistake. It is an initiation. It is the beginning of a descent, not into despair, but into depth, into truth, into the forgotten chambers of your being. And like any descent, it requires courage, not the kind that fights dragons, but the kind that sits in silence and listens to the voices within. The kind that admits, "I don't know who I am anymore," and lets that truth crack open the shell of false certainty. This is the sacred unraveling, the moment when the old must dissolve for the new to emerge, not from outside, but from within. And though it feels like you are losing your way, you are in fact beginning to find it. In the middle of the storm, beneath the waves of doubt, there is a light, faint but constant. Not on the outside, but deep within your chest. It's not loud. It doesn't shout. It hums like a forgotten melody you once knew in childhood dreams. That light is your soul, and though you may feel lost, it has never lost you. You were not meant to live anchored in certainty. You were meant to navigate by inner stars, by whispers of the self, by the quiet knowing that arises not from the mind, but from the heart that has learned to trust the invisible. This moment, this sea, this silence, it's not the end. It's the beginning. The stirring of something ancient within you. The soul does not speak in answers. It speaks in invitations. So if you're floating now, if the ground beneath you has vanished and the sky offers no clear path, breathe. You're not broken. You're being called. Called to remember. Called to feel. Called to awaken. And though the waters feel wide and uncertain, they are also sacred. They are where the real journey begins. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the noise begins to fade. Not the noise of the outside world, but the inner noise, the judgments, the demands, the endless striving to be someone. to be seen, to be enough. In that space, where confusion once reigned, something else begins to emerge. A whisper, a soft pull, a flicker of remembrance. It doesn't announce itself with certainty. It doesn't come dressed in clarity. Instead, it arrives like a breeze through an open window in a room you didn't know had grown stale. It's subtle, this calling. You might dismiss it as imagination, a passing feeling, a strange thought. But if you pause long enough, you'll realize it's been there for a while. This is the voice of the soul, not loud, not logical, but insistent in its own sacred rhythm. It speaks not in words, but in symbols, in the ache in your chest when you see a forgotten photograph, in the sudden tears that rise when you hear a melody from years ago, in the way a dream lingers like a scent long after you wake. The soul is not linear. It does not argue. It remembers. And when you begin to listen, truly listen, you'll feel something ancient inside of you begin to stir. Sometimes it speaks through restlessness, that feeling that your life, though full, is somehow hollow. Sometimes it shows itself in repetition, patterns you can't seem to break, relationships that echo the same wounds. Sometimes it calls through pain. The body tightens, the heart closes, the nights stretch longer. We think we're being punished. But what if we're being summoned? Carl Jung believed that symptoms, recurring dreams, even emotional wounds were not just things to be cured, but messages, clues from the unconscious. He saw them as invitations, calls to deeper understanding, to integration, to soul. What if the anxiety isn't something to silence, but a flare from your inner world asking to be seen? What if the numbness isn't failure, but a sign that you've been disconnected from what truly matters? What if your sadness isn't weakness, but grief for the parts of yourself you've abandoned to survive? This is the moment when the inner world begins to awaken, not because you forced it, but because you stopped running. You turned, however briefly, toward the very thing you tried to escape. And there, in the discomfort, you heard something, a feeling, a knowing. The soul doesn't demand perfection. It asks only for presence. But presence is difficult when you've spent a lifetime performing, when you've learned to measure your worth by the roles you play, the approval you receive, the productivity you maintain. Beneath all of that, there is a child, a tender, luminous part of you that never stopped believing in something more. That child remembers. The sky before it was named. The joy of being for no reason. The trust that life in its mystery is sacred. The soul speaks through longing. That ache you feel when you look at the stars too long. That quiet pull toward a book you didn't know you needed. That sudden desire to walk into the forest and not return for a while. We are not taught to trust these things. But what if they are the only things truly worth trusting? Not every whisper is meant to be understood. Some are meant to be followed. Not with certainty, but with reverence. The soul doesn't give directions. It offers orientation. And often the orientation comes in the form of symbols. You begin to notice them. A bird that lands beside you at the exact moment you feel lost. A recurring image in your dreams. A sentence from a stranger that leaves you breathless. These are not accidents. They are the language of the soul. In the modern world, we've become fluent in the language of efficiency, logic, and achievement. But we've forgotten the dialect of mystery, of poetry, of silence. Jung taught that the soul lives in the symbol, not the slogan. It dwells in metaphor, not measurement. To hear it, we must learn to feel again, to see again, to wonder again. You may feel foolish at first, listening to dreams, following intuition, honoring synchronicities. But that foolishness is the beginning of wisdom. It's the unraveling of the ego's grip and the return to something real, something sacred. You are not lost. You are being called. And while the world may not validate that call, your soul does. Every time you pause, feel and listen, you step closer to it. Closer to the quiet place inside where you are already whole, where nothing is missing, where the light has never gone out. So when the whisper comes, soft, unassuming, and deeply familiar, don't ignore it. Don't analyze it away. Sit with it. Let it move through you. Let it remind you of who you were before the world told you who to be. Let it guide you, not with answers, but with presence. And in that presence, you'll remember the soul never left. It's been waiting, watching, whispering. All you needed was to turn inward, to be still long enough to hear. There is a quiet constancy within us, a center that does not shift with the winds of life, though we often forget it exists. Beneath the layers of fear, ambition, identity, and roles lies something deeper, something untouched by time or circumstance. It does not seek recognition. It does not crave approval. It simply is. Carl Jung called this presence the self, not the ego, which is fragile and shaped by the world, but the self, the totality of who we are, both conscious and unconscious, light and shadow. It is the inner North Star, the silent compass, the true nucleus of our being. But most of us live so far from it. We confuse our careers, our names, our personas with our essence. We become what others expect. We wear the mask, the persona, as if it were skin, and for a while it works. We feel accepted, we belong, but slowly, invisibly, something begins to fray. The mask becomes heavy, the performance becomes exhausting, and a strange yearning begins to surface, a longing not for more but for real. The ego wants control, it wants clarity, certainty, admiration. It builds identities like castles, only to realize they stand on sand. But the self is different. It whispers, not shouts. It waits, not demands. It offers depth, not drama. And when we begin to feel that inner tension, that quiet dissonance between the life we're living and the truth we're ignoring, we are standing at the doorway between ego and soul. It is a sacred threshold. The self does not impose, it does not force us to follow. It simply radiates like a distant star. And like ancient navigators who found their way across dark oceans by watching the skies, we too are invited to navigate our inner life by turning toward this subtle inner light. But to do that, we must turn away from the noise, from the relentless pursuit of approval, from the temptation to define ourselves by external success, from the compulsion to always be certain. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And yet becoming who you truly are is not about adding more. It's about peeling away. It's about unlearning, about removing the layers that were never yours to begin with, the expectations, the borrowed dreams, the inherited fears. The self is not found in perfection. It's found in wholeness, in embracing all of you, the brave and the broken, the sacred and the scared, the parts you love and the parts you hide. It is a return, a remembering, a homecoming to a truth that has been with you all along. But the journey to that center is not easy. It asks you to let go of what is false, to surrender the illusion of control, to walk into the dark not with a map, but with trust. And here is the paradox. The more you align with the self, the less you need to strive, the less you need to prove. Because from that center, you begin to live from essence, not image, from depth, not performance. The self is not a goal to achieve. It's not a title to earn. It's a presence to return to. And when you live from that place, something shifts. Life becomes less about conquering and more about becoming. Less about fixing and more about integrating. You stop asking, "How can I be more?" and begin to wonder, "What part of me have I forgotten?" This inner guidance does not give step-by-step directions. It offers alignment. When something resonates deeply, when your whole body says yes, even if your mind is unsure, that is the self speaking. When you feel inexplicably drawn to something, an idea, a place, a person, that's not coincidence, it's orientation. To trust the self is to trust the sacred intelligence within you, not the conditioned voice of fear or ego, but the quiet knowing that emerges when you are still, honest, and open. This kind of trust doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It teaches you how to walk with it. When the world feels fragmented, when your identity feels like it's unraveling, remember, this is often how the self begins to emerge. Not in the clarity, but in the collapse. Not in the answers, but in the questions that refuse to go away. The self is patient. It waits in dreams, in silence, in symbols. It waits in the longing you feel when you gaze at the night sky, in the tears that come without reason, in the deep sense that there is something more, something you can't quite name. And it will wait until you are ready to turn inward and say, "I'm listening." In that listening, you will find not a destination, but a direction. Not a final answer, but a deeper intimacy with life itself. The self is not somewhere far. It is the still point within, the star that never fades, the light that does not flicker, even in your darkest nights. And when you begin to trust that light, not as a concept but as a living presence within you, then even in the uncertainty you are no longer lost. You are led. There comes a moment when standing still becomes more painful than moving forward, when the weight of pretending, pleasing and performing becomes too heavy to carry. It is in this moment that the soul begins to stir with urgency, not with panic, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that does not arrive in words, but in a quiet resolve that something must change, even if you cannot yet explain what. The journey inward is not paved. It is not illuminated by guarantees or promises of ease. It is a path you must walk alone, guided not by certainty but by courage, the kind of courage that trembles, doubts, and still steps forward. To begin this journey is to let go of the illusion that you must always know where you're going. It is to admit that the maps handed to you by others no longer fit the landscape of your soul, and so you walk, not with answers, but with a willingness to listen, to feel, to trust something older than thought. This is the journey of individuation. Jung described it as the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who you think you must be to be loved or safe, but who you are when all masks fall and all roles dissolve. It is not a becoming in the sense of adding more, but in the sense of uncovering, returning, reclaiming. You begin to see the fragments you've disowned, the parts of you buried in shame, in fear, in the need to belong. And one by one they rise, through memories, through emotions, through sudden insights, and ask to be seen, to be held, to be integrated. The world may not understand this process. It may call it a crisis, a breakdown, a retreat. But deep inside something knows this is a sacred undoing, a necessary unraveling. Because the soul cannot grow in a structure that denies its truth, there are moments on this path that will feel like drowning, times when you question everything, even your own sanity. The old self begins to fall away, and yet the new has not fully arrived. This is the liminal space, the in-between, the threshold. It is not comfortable, but it is holy, and in this space the shadows emerge. Not to punish, but to be reclaimed. You meet the parts of yourself you were taught to reject, the anger, the grief, the longing, the tenderness. Each one carries a key. Each one holds a fragment of the wholeness you are returning to. To walk this path is not to become better, but to become real, to choose authenticity over approval, depth over appearance, soul over image. You begin to notice things, the way certain places calm your nervous system, the way some relationships drain you while others nourish your being. You become sensitive, not weak but attuned, to your body, your breath, your intuition. You start saying no, not from rebellion, but from reverence. You begin to choose, not out of fear, but from alignment. This is what it means to navigate from within, to let your inner life become your compass. It is not always efficient, nor linear, but it is true. And in this truth you begin to heal, not just your wounds, but your relationship with yourself. There is no final arrival, no perfect version of you waiting at the end. There is only the deepening, the softening, the remembering. You learn to walk beside your uncertainty, not as an enemy, but as a companion. You begin to see fear as a threshold, not a stop sign. You stop chasing answers and start asking better questions. Not, how do I fix myself, but what is this feeling asking of me? Not, how do I escape this pain, but what is the lesson hidden in this darkness? And slowly, something begins to shift. The world outside no longer dictates your worth. The chaos around you does not shake your core, because you are rooted now, not in identity, but in essence. You realize you are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. And wholeness includes it all. The light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, the knowing and the mystery. The path is narrow, but it is yours, carved by every step you take in integrity, in presence, in love. And though others may not understand your choices, your pace, your silence, you begin to understand yourself. And in that understanding there is peace, not the peace that comes from everything being easy, but the peace that comes from finally being aligned with who you really are. This is the journey of the soul, a journey that cannot be rushed, only honored. There is a light within you that has never gone out. Even in the moments when you felt the most lost, even when the silence was unbearable and the path invisible, that light remained. It may have flickered. It may have been buried beneath layers of doubt, fear, or old stories, but it never disappeared. Because the soul does not abandon you, it waits for your return. As you move through the dark valleys of your inner world, something begins to happen. A quiet shift, not dramatic, not sudden, but unmistakable. You begin to see with new eyes. You start to recognize that the pain was not punishment, but initiation. That the confusion was not failure, but a deeper kind of guidance. That even your loneliness had meaning because it brought you back to yourself. This is the moment when the light returns, not from the outside, but from within. And you realize it was there all along. You begin to feel the subtle presence of peace, not the kind that comes from things going right, but the kind that arises when you stop fighting yourself. A stillness that no longer depends on certainty or control. A quiet knowing that you are enough, not because you've achieved anything, but because you are whole in your very being. There is a power in no longer needing to pretend, in no longer seeking your worth in others' eyes. In standing in the truth of who you are, even if that truth is tender, unfinished, or still unfolding. You start to live differently, more slowly, more attentively. You notice beauty in places you once overlooked. The way light falls through the window, the way a breeze touches your skin, the way your own breath rises and falls like an ocean tide. You begin to cherish silence, not as emptiness, but as presence. You find meaning in solitude. You no longer fear being alone because you are no longer a stranger to yourself. The soul, once buried, begins to speak again. In colors, in music, in sudden tears, in the way your heart responds to things that have no logical value but feel sacred nonetheless. You remember what it means to be alive, not just existing but alive, with feeling, with purpose, with mystery. This is not a life free of suffering, but it is a life anchored in something deeper than suffering, in truth, in connection, in soul. Carl Jung wrote, "We are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become. And now, after everything, you begin to choose differently. You no longer live in reaction, but in response. You no longer seek to escape the past, but to understand it, to gather its gifts and to weave them into wisdom. Forgiveness becomes less about forgetting and more about releasing yourself from the chains of old wounds. You see now that healing was never about erasing pain, but about transforming your relationship to it. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be in honest relationship with what is. Wholeness is not a destination. It is a way of being, a willingness to meet yourself as you are without judgment, a choice to live from the heart, even when it feels vulnerable, a commitment to stay open, especially when closing would be easier. And the soul thrives in this openness. You may still have days of doubt. You may still feel the shadows rise, but now you know you are not those shadows. You are the one who sees them, holds them, and chooses love anyway. You walk with the wisdom of someone who has faced themselves and come through the fire softened, not hardened. Now you are led not by fear but by alignment. You recognize that your inner compass is reliable, not infallible but true, because it speaks in feeling, not formula, in resonance, not rules. And when you follow it, you feel a quiet yes echo inside you, a yes that is older than words. You begin to offer this presence to others, not through advice, but through being. Your very existence becomes a lighthouse, not perfect, not above anyone, but radiant in its honesty. Others may not know what it is they sense in you, but they feel safer in your presence, not because you have the answers, but because you have the depth. This is the gift of living from the soul. You are no longer chasing something outside yourself. You are embodying something eternal within. The star that guided you through the dark now lives in your eyes, in your voice, in your choices. And even in moments of uncertainty, you no longer panic, because you know deeply, unshakably, that you are never truly lost. You have found your way home, not to a place, not to a role, but to the unshakable center of your being. And from that place, life becomes something else entirely. Not a race, not a test, but a sacred unfolding, a returning, a quiet, luminous belonging to yourself. Have you ever wondered if the pain you carried all these years was not a curse, but a doorway? What if the emptiness was not a void to be feared, but space being cleared for your soul to return? And what if all along you weren't meant to find your answers in the world outside, but in the quiet pulse of your own heart? This journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who you are beneath the silence, the fear, the masks. Your soul has always known the way. It was only waiting for you to listen. So now, take a breath, not just into your lungs, but into your being. Let it reach the places you abandoned. Let it touch the wounds you've hidden. And let it remind you, you are not broken. You are becoming whole. If this message touched you, if something inside you stirred, resonated, awakened, don't keep it to yourself. Support this work with a super thanks and help this light reach others who are still lost in their night. Leave a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Tell me what this video sparked inside you. And most of all, subscribe and stay close. There is more soul to uncover, more light to reclaim, more of you waiting to be lived. Your journey has already begun, and the star within you has never stopped shining.